This is Sherry Cardinal. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, diplomat in the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress. I'm also known as Miscosikwe. Miscosikwe. Nindig Ojibwe Mo. Gichi Nokomis. Adik Songab Dudam. I am the Red Woman, the chief grandmother of our standing reindeer clan. I am an Ojibwe person. So you're getting both of me today. You're getting, for this cardinal hour, it might be a cardinal few minutes. We'll see what happens as Creator leads me in what He wants me to say. So, the other day, as many of you know, Midiga Ogichida is my cousin by blood, but more importantly, by relationship, he's my son, the son of my heart. And we relate to each other in that way. People that do ancestry might think that that's kind of odd, but it's not. Not in the Ojibwe tradition, where relationships are more based on necessity and within the life of the relationship itself, not necessarily based on lineal, although lineal is important as well. But we have many ways of describing our relationships. So this is partly about Midiga. We did the Cardinal Hour together for at least a year and a half. And we plan to do it again, but right now I'm flying solo because I want to say a few things about what's been happening. And especially about what's been happening since we have attempted to lean our teepee poles in with the Mormons and how that's affecting people and why that's affecting people. It's important to understand because at this time of year, what is it that we are talking about? Peace on earth, right? Let there be peace on earth. Let there be peace. What does peace mean? Well, peace is not just the absence of war, it's more in depth than that. Peace literally means in the Greek to be at one with, to be united. Okay? So it's important to have that concept in our head, especially at this time of year, because we talk peace all the time. Let's have peace. Well, most of us are what I call peace hypocrites, meaning we talk a good game, but our behavior doesn't follow. The action doesn't follow the words. And this has specifically happened a lot lately when we've been doing the outreach to the Mormon church. Midiga did a video the other day, and in it, he coined a phrase, and he he kind of like choked on it a little bit. That's okay, because it hit me like a load of bricks. And he said when he was describing himself and his fight for his own integrity, because it's being constantly attacked, he was talking about how he grew up and when he was a man of war in the Marines and how that has affected him. And the phrase that he coined was, I've become desensitized to suffering. Think about that phrase for a moment. What does it mean when you're desensitized to something? Well, you're no longer affected by it. If you're desensitized, then it can just float by you unnoticed. That can be a good thing in some ways. You know, we try to desensitize from things that upset us. But when we become desensitized, not knowing, not recognizing, not reacting to our own suffering, that creates a huge, huge blind spot in how we relate not only to ourselves, but to other people. And what it creates is a situation of violence. Okay? If we can't relate to our own suffering, it's hard to have empathy for other people's suffering. And then what we do psychologically is we project our suffering onto others, which means that we get into a state of contention, of strife, of disbelieving, disproving, basically dissing somebody else in some way because we are dissing ourselves. We are not being truthful to ourselves in some way or hiding something from ourselves or others or others. Okay? And so we do what's called projecting. Okay, now seeing the illustration means that we're pointing the finger at somebody else, that we're at a point of conflict or contention with somebody, or trying to prove them wrong. Now, the visual should give you what I'm going to say next. The art of projection is blaming someone else for what we can't accept in ourselves. Pointing the finger means three are pointing back at the self. So, for example, if someone accuses me of lying, many people have accused me of lying, what would I say back to them? I would ask the question, what are you hiding from yourself? What is it in you that you don't like about lying? What is it that you're lying about? Most people will get real defensive. Oh, I'm not lying. He's the one that's lying. Well, that, again, you've done it again. Okay? So the response would be, I'm not sure. Let me find out. If you want to be honest about it. Or, I've been keeping family secrets for nigh on 40 years. Maybe it's time for me to come clean about what really happened. And the first way as a therapist, I know somebody's lying is that they're saying, I had a wonderful childhood. Well, that's really not possible, not in the world we live in. So keep in mind that when we're pointing the finger at somebody else, there's three pointing back at me. Okay? And when we're doing that, we're going to project the violence that we are desensitized to that's happened to us. And by violence, I mean everybody in the world, pretty much a generalization, but a truth too, has been abused in some way just by the fact that you're living on Earth. Okay? And we then, this is the paradox, normalize the abuse and don't recognize it. I see that a lot. I live in a over 55 apartment building. Lots of women here, older women, and I can watch it happen that somebody says something that really is mean, and they'll laugh it off and pay no attention to it and don't recognize that they've just been abused. I very often have to name things like that. It's part of my job as a therapist is to name the truth that's happening. So I'll say, well, that's really emotional abuse when someone's calling you out in front of other people and tries to embarrass you or does embarrass you. That's a form of abuse. Oh, oh yeah. Now I see it. I can't even tell you how many times that happens. Okay? That's just one example. The soup of the day, the phrase du jour is, oh, you're gaslighting me. Well, maybe yes, maybe no. Gaslighting, in the way that it's used in psychology, is a way of undermining someone's mental well being by making them doubt themselves, their own thoughts and feelings, or reality. Okay? It doesn't mean that somebody offended you or said something that you don't agree with, or the other ways I've seen this phrase used. But that's one of the ways, and we project that lateral violence. You see it every day on the news. Don't believe your lying eyes, right? Believe what I'm telling you. And we see that with the politics of this past year, that everyone's blaming everybody else and saying everybody else is a threat to democracy. And so you start to believe what you're hearing and you doubt your own sense of it. Well, the truth is, as an aside, the only threat to democracy that exists is within each one of us for failure to act to keep democracy alive. Now, I'm not talking about governments. I'm talking about true democracy, which is a way of being non judgmental, allowing every person to be their true self and have their own true beliefs and come together as a group to be able to tolerate the differences. Okay? But what happens? We don't seem to be able to do that anymore. And with all the attacks on Mitika, I would sit back, I would say some things, try to say pointed things. But I want to say to those attacking Mitika, check your own self first. Those three fingers are pointing back at you. Why do you feel you have to disprove him? Why can't you try to understand where he's coming from? If you know his background, you can understand his suffering and why he's reactive in certain places. And then you say, oh, he shouldn't be angry. He comes across as angry. Well, he's carrying the anger of millions of us, of millions of peoples that have suffered and are still suffering and even don't recognize their own suffering. And so we continue to project that onto other people's, which means we do lateral violence. Doesn't matter if we're indigenous, white, European, other, doesn't matter. It seems to be the human condition. So I'm going to suggest a reason why that is. And I'm going to get into a little neurobiology here, because anyone that knows me knows that I talk about being whole within yourself first and foremost. That means body, soul, spirit, mind, emotions, everything about you. For Ogi Chagwan, spirit living within a body, we need to understand our bodies and how that impacts what we do and think and how we behave. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about post-traumatic stress injury. It's become a big deal because it's kind of funny. When I first started practicing in the late 70s, early 80s, it was mostly an unknown thing. Okay. And slowly but surely we started to recognize it. And then we called it a disorder, like it was something intrinsic within the person. We're disordered. Okay. But that's not the truth either. Something bad happens to us that dysregulates us, throws us into disarray. And how does it do that? Well, pay close attention here because there's going to be a test afterwards. Just kidding. But this is important to understand about yourself and why you feel you need to point the fingers at other people. Okay? Research into post-traumatic stress injury has become very scientific and physiological, and it's attached to our brains and our vagus nerve. Vagus, VAGUS, not in Las Vegas, but vagus nerve. The trunk of it goes from our brain down into our gut. Yeah, we really do have gut issues when we're emotionally upset. What's one of the first symptoms of emotional upset? An upset stomach, loss of appetite, overeating. Okay? Those are all symptoms of the dysregulation of our vagus nerve. How does that dysregulation take place? It's through impact, through unresolved stress and anxiety. Okay? And what happens when we have stress is that through the vagus nerve, our sympathetic nervous system is activated. So follow me here now. Don't get lost in this. I'm simplifying it because it's simple to understand. If your vagus nerve is activated and your sympathetic nervous system is activated, what does it mean when your sympathetic nervous system is activated? Well, that means your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response takes over. Your heartbeat quickens. All of your energy goes to protecting your life and limb. Okay? You're revved up. Your accelerator is constantly pushed to the mat. Okay? You're ready to fight or flight. Okay? So unrelieved stress and anxiety and unresolved trauma leaves us in that revved up state. So when we say, oh, that triggered my PTSD or PTSI, that's what happens. Something is going on that your brain says you're in imminent danger. Doesn't matter if it's physical or psychological. Okay, remember, we're all one being. That sympathetic nervous system is revving. Okay? Which is a good thing if you're facing a saber-toothed tiger. Okay? But nowadays, the saber-toothed tiger in general are other people. Okay? As we're clawing and scratching and and disagreeing and being in contention and criticizing. Turn on the news, that's all you hear. That's all you hear. It is systemic. It is in our systems, our school systems, our church systems, our government systems, our own thought systems. Then, on the other hand, is the parasympathetic nervous system. The two nervous systems are complementary, meaning that they work together, but they're not the same. Parasympathetic is the way that you calm yourself, the way that your system returns to normal after a threat. Your breathing relaxes, your pupils go back to their normal size, your blood flow goes back to normal, your muscles relax, your digestive system relaxes. The common vernacular for this psychologically is the parasympathetic nervous system helps us to rest and digest, literally. Now, what happens if you never get there? What happens if you're mostly living in your sympathetic nervous system, which is where most people are? Part of therapy is teaching people what triggers their sympathetic nervous system, what type of violence that they've experienced that they have now internalized, that your system is totally pressed on go. How do we calm that down? That's part of the therapeutic process and part of what I teach. What do we do about it? It's possible. I'll give you an example from myself. Thanksgiving, I was with my cousins, and I love them dearly. And we all have a level of suffering. We've suffered losses in the family recently of key people. We've suffered physically. A lot of us are getting older, aching pains and things. The younger generations coming up, they were there too. It was a real blessing having all of us together. But something happened during that dinner. One of the youngsters, I say youngsters loosely because they're late teens, early 20s, had been working, and she was describing a robbery that happened in her store, which she didn't witness. Um, it happened apparently in an aisle, and really nobody saw it happen until the person called police, and the police came in, and the robbery was reported by the victim. And quite suddenly, as we want to do, we started the projection. Well, why didn't that woman call the police right away? Why didn't she scream? Why didn't she do this? If it had been me, I would have done that, or I would have done this and I would have done that. Well, I had to intervene. And kindly. I wasn't upset, I wasn't angry, but I had to intervene, and I had to say, I can pretty much count on the fact that I'm the only person at this table that has faced a gun in a robbery. And I can tell you that no matter what you say here about woulda, shoulda, coulda, and why didn't she or why did she do what she did, that none of you know what you're talking about. Because when you're faced with a situation like that, your brain doesn't go, oh, it's a robbery. I need to do something. I need to do what? Call the police, call 911, duck for cover. No, you don't have time to think of those things. See, I'm getting a reaction now. Um, it takes your brain a few seconds to realize what's happening because, in general, we're not trained to think of at any moment, I'm going to be robbed, and I'm going to train myself to react this way, and this way, so that it becomes automatic. I don't even have to think, I just react to the situation. That's how we train first responders. I've been a first responder. I know I've been through that training. I got pretty handy handling weapons after that robbery. I used to do competition shootings and things because I never want to be able or have to face another situation where I feel helpless. Okay? That's part of post-traumatic stress is you feel helpless against the opposition, against the threat that's coming towards you. Okay? So I had to stop, and everybody changed the subject. It was all copacetic. No one seemed upset, but I was triggered. My sympathetic nervous system started immediately. I could feel the anxiety rising, my heartbeat doing this. Okay. Um, I'm trying to slow it down just talking about it. Um, and so what I did is I went over, and dinner was over. I had eaten my fill, and it was yummy, scrumptious, best turkey ever. And I went and sat in a quiet corner on the sofa and did some deep breathing, 4 square breathing, and visualized for myself I'm in a safe place. That's not happening. And I was able to engage my parasympathetic nervous system to calm myself. Okay? And my stomach got upset, which wasn't fun after eating a big meal like Thanksgiving. So it was immediately I'm aware of my triggers and my physiological sympathetic nervous system responses. But that still doesn't mean that I can control them. They just happen. Okay. But I can control what happens after they trigger. That's part of what therapy teaches you. But in the meantime, most people don't bother to say what just happened, what triggered me. They just react. I responded. I had the awareness after 40 some years teaching this, kind of have to practice what I preach. But most people just react and attack, react and attack. You can see it everywhere. Just look for it. React and attack. React and attack. We don't respond and reply. We react and attack. And this is what's been happening with Mediga. He hits a lot of nerves because he speaks truth. People don't like it when they hear truth about themselves, unless they're very, very personally aware and in their own healing process. That's possible, and that happens too. There are a lot of people that have a sympathetic ear and heart towards the message that Mediga brings, and they learn from it and they grow from it. Then there's the other ones that react and attack. Okay? So if you're one of those, just know that you are perpetuating lateral violence. And that's something that you have to come to terms with. Not expect Mediga to change his ways, behavior, clothing, way of speaking, so that you don't have to change. That's the gist of it. The responsibility for your own response ability little hyphen there. That's what you have to learn. Not react and attack. And in order to not react and attack, you have to become sensitized to your own suffering. Become aware of the trauma that you hold in your own body and mind. What makes you sick? What gives you dis-ease? So that when someone else speaks the truth that hits you, you can go, oh yeah, I've experienced that in my own way. It may be different, but we've all experienced it. There is no person that escapes unscathed, okay? Especially in media. It's so easy, too easy. Attack, react, and attack. So this is a message. If you see this message in yourself in some way, it's time to stop. Take a good self-inventory. Do your own therapeutic work, your own self-awareness, so that when you're doing this, okay, maybe it turns to God and me, and not pointing, but caressing, caring, being kind. Huh? See how the fingers tell the story. Just don't leave them like this. Next on the Cardinal hour, actually it's what, 33 minutes. I'm going to stop right there. Let this sink in. Watch it as often as you have to let it, to absorb it, to, as the eminent psychiatrist Carl Jung says, make friends with your shadow. The shadow is what we project onto others that we don't want to see in ourselves. Okay? So if you're blaming or shaming someone else, it means that that seed is in you. So water that seed. Fertilize it. Let it grow so you can pluck it out. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. Next time, I'll talk about ways that we can engage our parasympathetic nervous system to calm us and to learn how to respond and reply and not react and attack. Thank you for listening.